Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Now What Next Steps podcast here at Malibu Pacific Church. Hey, if you haven't listened to this past week's Sunday, please, by all means, press pause on this podcast and go listen to that awesome sermon before you listen to this podcast, because this will make a little more sense because we're actually going to be doing a deep dive into what happened this past Sunday during the sermon. But you know what? I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, so keep listening. All right, you're still listening, which means that you either A, disobey, you little animal you, or number two, you listen to the listen to the sermon. There we go. It's going to be an awesome podcast. We have a special guest today. Her name is
Amy Pendergraft.
It's Amy. We'll fix that in post. All right, have all the cheers and all that kind of stuff too going. Hey, Amy, how's your day?
My day's good. How was your day?
It's going really well. So this podcast is really just going to be asking some questions about what happened during the sermon, where Amy was going, the Lord was leading her. And my first question was, why don't you think the sermon really did anything on Sunday? Nobody really liked it. So what do you think? What do you think was the problem?
I think there was a little fog. It was Mother's Day. Everyone was, it was a little more subdued crowd.
Oh my gosh, I'm totally joking. I love that. At first you were like, where are you going with this question? Where are you going with this question? And then I said it.
You guys should watch the video because you can see my eyes get bigger and bigger.
She's like, what happened? What happened? No, it was a phenomenal sermon. Phenomenal Sunday. And it was Mother's Day of all. Yeah, so we want to make sure that Amy had a really relaxing Mother's Day. She's a mother of 3. And just to make sure that, she didn't have much to do. So you just preached a whole sermon and worked on that for a whole week. And with all the other things that were going on in your life too. So real quick, when you were asked, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Asked, hey, preach Mother's Day. I like just the giggle. First thought. Shoot from it.
Typical.
Which
right?
is?
We gotta have the mom preach on Mother's Day. Right?
Yeah.
We gotta have the lady in the crowd, or the mom, preach on Mother's Day.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Which is kind of funny because I don't think any moms are thinking, oh, I really hope today it's a woman up there. But
that's awesome,
it's
right?
also a privilege, and I loved it. So happy to get to do it, and I do love to teach God's word. It's one of my favorite things. So
we all know that you do that, and you do it so well. So thank you for doing that. But I love just the authenticity right there. It's just like, all right, got to get the mom up to preach. Who's going to draw the short straw? I'll gladly preach any other day because I kind of want to relax. Before we go into the sermon, what's your typical Mother's Day routine? What's one of your favorite things, highs and lows of Mother's Day?
Well, this one was great. Mm-hmm. I have now had the routine of having my kids hike with me because they can't complain on Mother's Day if it's Mother's Day for hiking. But I do, one favorite Mother's Day we had in our house was, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and my kids decided they were going to give me a spa day. So they had bought a magazine at the store and some chocolate and water bottle and sent me to go sit at the pool. And then when I came back down, my daughter painted my nails. And, there were all these little steps that went into the spa day, and I thought that was pretty cute that they had somehow, I don't go to spa very often, but somehow they had still picked up that this is a cultural norm for moms. So yeah, I hope you all got to go to the spa, moms out there.
Absolutely.
Or had your own at home.
For sure. So you're a big spa person when you do go?
I mean, I
or would
love.
You rather do
I love
else?
I like a good massage or a sauna or something like that. Yeah, but I don't. I mean, I would say I go once every 4 to 5 years.
Okay, so you're not a spa person.
No,
I'm not either.
Yeah,
I know other people that are. I know we haven't gotten to the sermon yet, but we're just getting to know your Mother's Day routine. So that's really sweet that your kids did that. And then is there anything Mother's Day that has changed where you were younger as a younger mom, newborn, and you're I just want to be with my baby versus I need a little more time, and now they're getting a little older and you're I just want to be with my babies. I don't know, is there anything going on?
When my kids were younger on Mother's Day, I loved getting a little bit of time for myself. Mm-hmm. And now that my kids are older and they're out in the world most of the time, I love saying, hey, this is our day. We're not doing anything else with anyone else. And so just everyone's home and I want to be with them. Yeah.
That's so awesome. Yeah. Shannon, that's my wife. She says it's Mother's Day, which means it's about her. It's not Mother's and her kids' day. So the kids can go away with the husband and she can just have a Mother's Day. But I was like, in blink of an eye, it's going to be the opposite. We're like, I just want my babies are there. So anyways, well, that's good. You like your kids. You heard it here first, everybody, on the podcast. We finally got Amy to say she likes her kids. Just kidding. All right, she loves kids. Great stuff. Okay, so let's deep dive into this past week for this Mother's Day special. It really wasn't, I mean, it was a Mother's Day special, but it was Life's a Ditch Session 5.
Yeah.
And you took on a really challenging topic, especially on a day that can either be very joy-filled or really, I mean, could be kind of crappy, to be honest, for some people. And that's the fine line that we try and walk here. Not saying the church is crappy, but like we know that anybody and everybody's story is walking through this door or onto this campus or watching online at any time. And we don't know the relationship they had with their parents, their mom, a mom-like figure, grandmother, if they knew them or not, or anything in between. So we try and celebrate, but also go, this could be a really crappy day.
Yeah.
So your main topic and kind of takeaway for the Sunday was what?
It was, how do we move from fear to faith?
Ooh.
And, you know, we were going to talk about the character of Mary and how she experienced God and it transformed her and she surrendered to God. I mean, that was really where I was starting to go with the sermon. And I just kept coming back to her willingness to move from fear to faith, and just knew that was what God was inviting us to talk about on Sunday. And I think I think motherhood is fearful. I think life is fearful. I think our culture is much more fearful than they previously were. Although I wasn't an adult then, you know, I think, so it's hard to know, but,
for sure.
And so it's just that I tried to not make light of it and say,
awesome.
I think it's really easy for us to be like, oh, just have faith in your fear. And so I try to give some real strong legs to it, because we have real fears that have come about because of real trauma we've experienced or negative situations. And so how do we put legs to this visceral reaction that we have to something, right? Like our fears come up and they surprise us and they can cause like a visceral reaction. And so how do we, in that moment of visceral reaction, how can we choose faith in that moment? And so that was, and I feel like Mary is a great example of that. And I'm sure that the journey from fear to faith took a little longer than the, one verse that we have in the Bible. But
absolutely.
But so it was I loved taking what I imagined she experienced from God in that moment that helped her move to faith.
That's awesome. All right, so for Mother's Day, you talked about Christmas, which is amazing. Even though we just heard that story 6 months ago. Oh my gosh, and we'll probably hear it again in another 6 months.
Right?
It's a great reminder, though, Amy, the way that you brought that word and brought it to life, especially through your eyes of being a mom. That's something that I could never do. So then, Andy can never do. And it's just, even though earlier in this conversation you said, we have to have the mom, let's get the token moms, talking.
Yep.
Thank you. We know it's a lot of work and it's a big sacrifice. So we hope that next Sunday you get real Mother's Day.
Yeah.
All right. So you talk about fear and you had a great acronym for that.
Yeah.
And did you know that an acronym actually has to be a real word? I didn't know that until like a couple months ago.
Oh, I did not know that.
Like I thought it was just like the first letter of something, like RAF stands for, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, it actually has to be a real word. And I'm now blanking on what it is when it's not a real word. But you had an acronym.
I did.
For fear.
Yes.
Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, it was false evidence appearing real.
Ooh.
So this idea that fear is not true yet. So it doesn't mean that you don't have good reason to believe that this could become true, but it's not true yet.
Gotcha.
It's false evidence appearing real. And I think it's a quote from Dr. Gerald Jampowski. He's the one who created that.
Do you know much of his work, any of his work, a little bit of his
No,
work?
not at all.
Okay.
I saw it. My mom's a therapist. She was the one, we were talking about fear together. We love to talk about, I always brainstorm with her and tell her like, hey, here's what I'm thinking about my sermon. And she's like, oh, I love this acronym from Dr. Gerald Jampowski. And I think it's come up in some other churches over the years. And, but
sure. He's actually a leading atheist.
Stop it.
I'm totally kidding. Okay, so
like, he is not.
I'm just kidding. Just let me see it.
But I don't know much about him.
No,
he could be, and I'd be like, you know what?
That was actually my
God's
question.
truth.
No, that's awesome. Amy just turned pale white again. I'm totally kidding. Totally kidding. She knows her. She's so good. No, I actually don't know. I didn't know if you knew his works, but that's awesome about your mom.
Yeah.
Talking about therapy,
yeah.
And so you were talking with your mom about this.
Yeah.
You were talking with your mom about a Mother's Day sermon.
Uh-huh.
There's so many great layers.
I know.
So you guys talked about that, and she had that quote. Is it like the hanging cat in her office? What I'm talking about? The hanging cat in the closet? No, like where did she get? Do you know where she got that quote from?
I don't know where she got it, but she, she's helps people who are navigating fear all the time.
Absolutely.
And so it's just one of those quotes that she holds in her heart, I think. And so when I was talking about, hey, I'm thinking about talking about from fear to faith, and she's like, oh, did you know that fear is false evidence appearing real? And so I was like, oh, I want to use that. Let's talk about that more. And and so I have to give her all the credit. No, it's one of my favorite things is always week or a couple weeks before I'm preaching, I'll talk to her about, hey, here's some things, some directions I'm going. I feel like she has a real unique perspective because she's in the trenches with people. She's in ditches with people all the time. So it's a great, I never want to hand God's word out and make it seem trite or easy, right? Like when we say, when God's word says, do not be anxious about anything, it's not like, oh, you're dumb if you're anxious. It's truly this like, no, really, like, you don't have to be anxious because there's something else you can do with your emotions that you're having, right? Do not be anxious about anything, but in prayer and petition. So what can we do? We can take these requests to God. We can pray. We can go to God. It's not a like, oh, you shouldn't have those feelings. It's no, here's what we do with those feelings. We get to carry them to a God who actually listens and who cares. And that's how we can move to fear to faith,
I love that was your approach, and it wasn't any shame or any like, I don't know, like it wasn't.
I don't like shame.
Well, that's.
I feel enough of that on my own.
I know. Well, but that's what I feel like a lot of people hear from churches is that oh, you have anxiety, you just don't believe enough, or you just don't pray enough.
Yeah.
I was talking with somebody earlier today that he is at a church, and he said you're not a Christian if you're not praying for 1 hour a day.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh.
Ooh, conviction.
Okay.
Sometimes I don't pray for an hour a day, team.
Sure. I love that in the book of, what book was that in? 1 hour exactly? Right? Like, I just don't get it. That like, why are we shaming people into loving Jesus or taking things to God?
Yeah.
I think we already have enough shame taking our anxieties to people that we love around us. Because we feel like, how do we deal with those things? So when you go from fear to faith, I just thought it was beautifully said that like bring it to God, like that's it. That's going to be one of the best ways to bring this fear to faith is by bringing it to God. Not saying you have to pray for an hour or do you just not believe enough, like all those things that that I constantly hear from some places, and it's crazy to me.
And in the passage, like when the angel comes to Mary, he gives her two things. He says, this is who God says you are, and it's different than maybe who she thought she was. And I think he's doing the same to us, because a lot of our fear comes from a concern that we're not enough, or that we're that we don't have what it takes, and so God comes to Mary and is like, yeah, you're not only are you enough, but you're highly favored. And then the other thing that the angel gives her is, and you're not alone. Like, God is walking through this ditch with you, and he's with you, and he's actually a good God. He's not just powerful, because he is powerful, but he's good too. And look how he's already working in the life of someone else in your family. And I just that was my favorite part about the passage, was just when I got to just sit in the character of Mary a little bit and what life maybe would have felt like for her, and just thinking about God bringing a baby to Elizabeth in this moment, and that she would have another mom to walk through this journey with as she was afraid. And so it was like she's not alone because God's with her, and then God's also working in the life of another woman in her family. And that was kind of I like God. He's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In the last, I don't know, 15 years or so, has there been a fear that was just a little too hard to bring to God?
Yeah, I mean, I think...
And now share it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. You don't share. I'm just asking.
No, I mean, I think there's always a, we talked about, there's always a lie in the middle of our fear, and so, yeah, I think that I think that lie of not being enough has held me hostage for a lot of years. And, I want to say I'm free from that lie, but like I have to constantly choose to have faith that that's not what's true of me, right? I have to continue to go to God and say, okay, like I'm really feeling like not enough in this situation. So I need you to be enough for me, and, and to choose to step forward in faith in that. But I would say that's kind of my, the big fear about myself. And then, as a mom, like, yeah, I have fears. Like my biggest fear, and I'm like unashamedly, like, is that my children will walk away from God, or I think this is actually my biggest fear, that they would walk away from God, and or that they would make a mistake that's irreparable. Right? So most mistakes that we make are repairable, but jump in the ocean, break your neck and die. Sorry, I don't mean to cause any of you moms out there to have irrational fears about your kid. There's a lie in
Morbid
that.
Mom podcast here on NPC. Check out the new show. Just kidding.
Yeah. But
totally.
It's,
those are real fears.
I think those are real fears, is that it's that, like, that my kid would do have a mistake. They would say they picked up drugs, tried drugs, and it would be fentanyl laced. It's those things of like, almost all the rest of it, I'm like, it's okay. You can fail a class. We can recover from that. Totally. You can, have a bad relationship. We can recover from that. But it's that kind of, as my kids are getting older, I feel like the stakes are so much higher. So anyway, that was counseling session here.
I'll charge you later. I'll ask your mom for improvements next time.
Exactly.
No,
she'll share them willingly. With all of us.
Amazing.
Me too.
I love that.
I love you, Mom.
Yay. And you turned out normal, which is great. This is awesome.
That's debatable.
We're the same. All together, we've all turned out quote unquote normal. I'm doing air tags right now in the microphone. I appreciate you sharing that. I think a lot of us, if you are a parent and you're listening to this, I think we all have similar feelings like that. It's really hard to talk about those things because we want to just talk about, my kid got the first place at this, or they got this and that, and this is where we're vacationing and that. But when you have those real fears, and you can have those conversations with other parents, I think you realize that we all have very similar fears.
Yeah.
And that is the people around us that we love with so much of our hearts.
Yeah.
That there's something that would happen to them.
Yeah.
That we can't do anything about.
Yep.
And that reminds me of this is like straight Jesus juke, but it's not that. Jesus dying on the cross, where God could have done something.
Yeah.
And his son's dying there, crying out, and God let it happen.
Yeah.
And I go, but God, you could have just.
Right.
There had to be something else.
Right.
There had to be something else, right?
Could have just beamed all of us and kept him,
Even your son asked, hey, is there any other way? I'm using the message right now, by the way, as I'm talking.
Yeah.
But how how do you go about the day by day after hearing your own sermon, after preaching your sermon of fear into faith, and walking alongside your kids and trying to turn your fear into faith?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would say that when it comes to my kids, the presence of God and the realness of Him is the only thing that can help me to set those fears aside for the minute, right? It really is like, I do believe that God is with them and that He's good. And so it's, it helps you to say, okay, God, like I trust you with my kids. And yeah, I think the tricky part is the longer you walk in faith, the more you know that doesn't mean that it's going to keep them from danger and harm. And so it's still just saying, okay, I trust that your presence is enough and that your love is enough for them and me.
Totally.
And both of us. And then I pick up the fear again and I have to remind myself again. And, so it's...
That's what I was just about to say, at least for me, is I have people ask, does it get easier when you have faith?
Oh, yeah.
And I go, yes and no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're like, that doesn't make sense. I'm like, it's a both and.
Yeah.
Because there are times where I go, yes.
Yeah.
And there are times when I go, no. It's like the same thing with my kids. I'm like, and trusting and being like, all right, God, I trust you. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easier to get to that trust point every day.
Yep.
But I at least can get there.
Yeah.
And 95% of the time.
Yeah.
To be honest. Because there's still times you freak out. You get a little choking episode or a little this, a little that.
Right.
It's like, God, come on.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So another deep question here. Want to know, who's your favorite kid? Just kidding. See, 180 there. No, we want you to know, if you're listening to this right now and you're whether you have kids or not, you're not supposed to do life alone. I know I'm broken record with that. If you can, this is a good place to find that community with other families to talk through these things.
Yeah.
I think parents have very similar fears, and they all have very similar shortcomings as well. So if there's a way that you can get connected here, and there's great ways, some next steps that you can get connected here. We have MOPS, Mothers of Preschoolers, you can get connected with, men's group, men's night, ladies' night. And
come to the ladies' night.
Exactly. Children's ministry, youth ministry. We have the Sunday morning worship service, but I can name 10 other ministries that are going on that are focused on finding community more than just a 200 people gathering. So find your people and have those conversations, because I bet you'll find a lot of very similar, thought processes that are going on in people's minds about kids, or even single life or dating life or any of those kind of things in between. And that's the beautiful thing about the church.
Yeah.
Is that. All right. So Amy, just 2 more questions about your sermon. What made you want to talk about Mary during this time?
I think the reason that she first came to our minds was because she's a mom, and an unexpected mom. So it wasn't, some of us find ourselves in a motherhood through a very traditional journey, and some of us find ourselves in motherhood in a non-traditional journey, and so it was, I think, just that, like, how can we, so at first we were looking at other biblical characters that were women. In fact, I was looking at like Hannah and Peninnah but just the beauty and simplicity of Mary, and just a chance to take a look at her. Because I think at Christmas, when we talk about it, we kind of focus in on God's movement, as we should, and Him bringing the Savior to the world. And
she's part of only Act 1 of the 3-part act.
Right, exactly.
So she's part of Act 1, and then that's it.
And then it's it. We're done. So
she comes back at the end of Easter, but for a little bit, but that's about it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. All right.
But I think Andy suggested it too, so that was part of it.
Oh, there we go. Oh, gotcha.
There's some honesty there.
There we go. Why not Esther though? Just kidding.
You know, I don't know. You'll have to ask him that later.
Side note, if you watch VeggieTales,
uh-huh.
Bob the Tomato, it's the only episode that Bob the Tomato is not in of VeggieTales because he plays the God portion in VeggieTales, and God's not mentioned in the book
in
of
Esther.
Dun dun dun, deep dive. Anyways, check that out. All right, so
I think it's called like Esther and the Great Pie War or something in the Great Pie War. Isn't it the Esther VeggieTales one? Anyway,
I actually don't remember.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I do. Children's Ministry for Life.
There you go. Youth ministry. We just watch those secretly. Going, man, why do they always get the best stuff? We only have pizza and dodgeball. All right. So as we're coming off of the final session this next week of Life's a Ditch, what's one thing you've taken away from this series?
Ooh.
That has been like, and it doesn't have to be like necessarily from other preachers or anything like that, but just
no, I know right away.
Okay.
It's people's stories.
Oh, people's stories.
I loved the interviews that we did, getting to hear about some of the real ditches that our community's been in. And I am sure that some of you that are listening, if you didn't watch those interview portion of the sermon, go back and watch some of those. Just hear the stories of how people navigated things like finding out that they had a child with Down syndrome and their response to that, and then how God brought beauty in that, and getting in growing up in a family with abuse and neglect, and then seeing how God's hand was in, it helped through even that, and stories of a tragic car accident that should have ended in death that God brought life out of. I mean, it's just so powerful to hear how God has worked in other people's lives, and how things that we see as horrible, bad, terrible, how God really can do beautiful things out of them. He can make beauty from hard things. So that's been my favorite part about Life's a Ditch.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I say that, and this is probably the unpopular thought, but I'll say this is just my own personal opinion. I don't believe the sermon's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Is that wild? I know. It's super wild.
It's because you're the music guy. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally joking.
I'm not even the music guy.
He's the production guy.
I'm not even the production guy.
Well, yes, you are. You do everything.
No,
Joel knows
I'm just
everything.
here for the food. No, I'm not. I'm merely a humble servant.
I'm sorry. No. I was just making light.
I think it all. I that's the beauty of it. I think it all works together. I think that
every piece.
The Sermon on the Mount was just as important as the little kid giving his fish and loaves of bread. As just as important as falling on your knees and washing feet and using what little money you have or little.
The widow's
cologne,
mite.
Little. I mean that and.
The perfume.
Perfume.
I
said cologne. So I'm a dude. And I'm still paraphrasing the message. Sorry. So used to being in that. Totally kidding. I just think it all works together, and so to hear that stories have affected people too. I've heard of numerous people say, "Can't believe we played that song that really touched my heart. Can't believe that there was that story. Can't believe that there's that sermon." I just love that it's not just one singular thing or one person. That it's a collective, true church of bringing all these different gifts, stories, and talents.
Amen.
Right? Yes. So thank you for being not the most important thing.
I was not the most
important.
There
we go. You were not. You. Everybody give a post-production. He's not the most important thing. No one. That's the cool thing. It's all about God. So we just keep pointing back to that. So that's not a Jesus juke question. Like, it's Jesus. I gotcha. But it really is really awesome how we can express our worship. And so even I'll say it, sacrificing part of your Mother's Day so that people could hear the story and hear you preach was just such a gift. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that said, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to Now What Next Steps podcast here at Malibu Pacific Church. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or hand gestures, please send them in to me, Joel at MalibuPacific.church, Joel, Joel, at MalibuPacific.church. Love to hear those. If you have any questions about the sermon Sundays or anything that's going on in the church, we love to answer them here on the podcast or in other venues as well through emails and messages, coffees, all that kind of stuff. I know Amy would love to hang out with you as well. Amy's our discipleship director here as well, and she is really looking forward to this next season. Can you just give us a little taste of what's going to happen here in these next couple months?
Yeah, we are going to gather. We're going to gather starting, in the next week. We want to gather with the men and the women, and we're separating out to do that because the men are throwing axes and we're sitting in a beautiful area. I don't know. And maybe next time the women are going to go throw axes, who knows? But we are going to gather in circles. We're going to gather together and get to know each other. We're going to have new rooted small groups that are launching out in August. And we're going to have different types of groups for different types of people. So we're hoping to have a starting point group and a rooted group and some other groups. So just a chance for you to figure out what is going to work in my schedule. What do I want to connect with more deeply? And what is my next step in connecting with people? And we really do believe, just like Joel said, the sermon is not the most important thing. The whole day is important. The worship is important. Every element is important. And so small groups are just an extension of that. It's a chance to sit in a room with other people who are experiencing God in their own unique way, and a chance for you to learn from them and teach them with your life and the questions that you're asking. And so
absolutely, it's really fun to join a small group too, because you just get to pick apart the sermon and tell everybody what you hated about it. So please join a small group. Just kidding.
It's not what small groups
It's not what it's supposed to be about. Everybody has good opinions. Make it constructive.
Yeah.
That's what I got. Anyways, again, question, comment, concerns, or hand gestures, love to answer them. Thank you again for listening to this. Hit that subscribe button. Smash that subscribe button. Share it with a friend who needs to hear it. And you can find the sermons on our YouTube page or on the church app. Download Malibu Plus now, available in all app stores. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And until next week, we'll see you. Bye.
Bye.